What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Monday, July 17th, 2017. Start of a brand new week here. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Right now, President Trump is speaking at a White House event to celebrate Made in America. This is the beginning of his attempt to revitalize our manufacturing, revitalize our leadership in the world in the making of products and the providing of services. And, of course, it's a really good idea. That's how you're going to bring the jobs back, is for the American people to be involved in making things and providing services that are the best in the world. And so along with changing the laws to favor domestic corporations and to penalize offshoring, it also places upon the American people, the American worker, a responsibility as well, that we treat these new jobs that are being created not just as a job, go in, do your 8 hours, take your paycheck, and go home, but to recover a sense of pride in what we're doing. And I'm old enough to remember where a lot of people who worked at things like automaking or various things like that, it wasn't just the money. They were proud to make cars. They were proud to make good quality clothing or plumbing or whatever. There was a pride of craftsmanship, and we need to go back to that as well. Because if Donald Trump succeeds in starting up these American companies and we all get jobs, we have to go in there with that commitment to do the very best that we can, to be the very best that we can, so the products that come out of those factories are going to be desired around the world over and above what is available for other countries. And again, going back to my age, I've seen this weird reversal. When I was a kid, Made in America meant the best on the planet. And if you saw Made in Japan or Made in China on something, it basically said it was an inexpensive piece of junk that wasn't going to last. And it's been tragic over the last 30 years to see that reverse, where what is made in China and Japan, we can't even do that here in the United States, such as iPhones and tablets and so forth. We need to bring that stuff home. And so we need to partner with Trump on this and say, yes, he can kick it off, but the responsibility to produce a quality product or service that the rest of the world is going to want to buy, that rests with us. We just have to keep that in mind here. Trump can't make it happen all by himself. We're going to have to help him on this one. All right, let's go ahead and grab a phone call from Mike in FEMA Region 10. And aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I just sent you an email about 30 minutes ago. I found something that I thought could go in the front cover of your weight loss book, and that is the 1959 MetLife Desirable Weight Tables for Americans.
Yeah, that was very interesting. Thank you very much for that. And I was looking at that, and according to MetLife in 1959, I'm still slightly overweight, but not by much. But Claire and I have both been going out to all these different websites trying to find the ideal weight for our height and frame type. I'm a medium frame. And they're all over the place. And it's almost like these things are a matter of fashion. And I remember there was a time in the 60s where they started to say that people really were too skinny and that a little more weight was going to be good for them. So I think ultimately it has to be at what point are you feeling the healthiest? Because there was one point in my life where I got my weight down to the range that was in that MetLife table that you sent me. And I actually looked very ill, because I was too thin, and I actually felt very ill. So I feel like right now I'm in my ideal weight range here, and I'm starting to research and pull together this little guidebook. And again, out there, I'm not a trained dietitian, I'm not a trained nutritionist, but for most of my life, I followed the advice of the experts to deal with my weight, and nothing happened. And so I researched it myself. I found something that works, and that's what I want to share with people. Again, in the interest of health, not of looking really good, in your Speedos out there on the beach.
Right, and obviously, like if you were a weightlifter, none of this would apply. They do everything on the body fat, and, someone like Arnold Schwarzenegger is off the charts because of his muscle weight.
Muscle density, yeah.
Right, and But what struck me here, and I'm just reading a little bit more into this, the average weight for the average height in 1959 for an American white woman was 5'3", and they're in the 110 to 122 pound range. However, that same person in the year 2002 was, on average, 162 pounds.
Yeah.
That's 46 pounds.
It's the chemicals in the food that they put in there to make you want to eat more. I was going through my family photo album from when I was a kid and got lots and lots of pictures because my father was really into photography in a big way. He had a Nikon and he had a Rolleiflex and we had our own dark room, which was a lot of fun to work in. And you just see all these skinny people around. You don't see these big, huge walking dirigibles like you see so common today. And so something has changed, if you will, in the environment. And that's really what the book is all about, is you need to understand that weight loss is big business, but like the medical industry, they don't really want you to lose the weight because then you're no longer a customer. And that's a big part of it. When I was very young, my father, who was into manufacturing, worked briefly for a startup company that was building a new type of exercise machine. And he was rather stunned to find out it was engineered to last at most only 30 hours of usage, because apparently the marketing research people had discovered that most people who buy one of these exercise machines, they'll try it out a few times, they'll get tired, they'll get frustrated because they're not getting an immediate feedback, because these things take time, and they would just throw it under the bed or out in the garage, and that was the end of it. Now, obviously, there are exceptions to that, like machines like the Bowflex, which are designed for very serious athletes and exercisers, and those things are built to last quite a bit longer. But a lot of the real inexpensive ones. And what they do is a little trick here, because during the springtime in the Northern Hemisphere, you tend to lose weight naturally anyway. So that's when all the diet books and the diet exercise machines come on out, because they know you're going to lose a little weight anyway, and they want you to think it's their product, rather than the fact that springtime we lose weight, and in the autumn we start putting weight on for the coming winter.
Mike, real quick on the kind of the planned obsolescence and the manufacturing side of things. I did see on the RBN website that Foxconn, I believe, is Taiwanese.
Yes.
They are planning to, I think it was Wisconsin or one of these Great Lakes states, Wisconsin, Michigan, something like 10 to 15,000 jobs. And their kind of contract, as I understand it, to manage the mainland Chinese factories. Now, I've sourced from Taiwan. I have products from Taiwan that I ship over, and I enjoy working with the Taiwanese, and I think that if they can do anything like that, bringing that back here, that would be great. And one thing geopolitically is that actually the Taiwanese are more inclined to have that in the U.S. They have a big, as you know, a big rift there between them and the mainlanders. So,
yes.
You know, all is not lost, and if we can bring that back, I know my iPhone 5, I've dropped it so many times, and it's still running. So I guess there's something to it, and if we can get people to work doing that here, that would be all the better.
Well, you know, something about the Asian markets, China, South Korea, Taiwan, they're very good at providing what importers will order. And if somebody says, I need a high quality, thus and such, that's what they're going to get. But if one of these big box stores comes on in and says, I need a kitchen mixer, and I want it for only $20, and I don't care how long it lasts, yeah, you're going to get that piece of junk as well. So a lot of times people will blame the Chinese manufacturers for the poor quality of the products in the big box stores, not realizing that what the big box stores are selling are exactly what the big box stores ordered to sell. Anyway, Mike.
Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot. We're going to let you go. We're going to let you go here. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates rejoining the network. We're going to take another phone call from Ron in Fort Worth, and then we're going to get back to the news. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, aloha. Hey, I got a question for you. You was talking about bringing jobs back to America, but then we've got Trump here today. I mean, I'm for Trump and everything, but I mean, he's got the Homeland Security guy going to bring 15,000 people out of India back over here on a temporary basis to take our tech jobs. Now, what about the tech guys that are here in America that's out of the job or been forced to not make as much, and they're going to bring those Indians over here, and then they're going to be making just a little bit, taking our jobs. I mean, he's doing the opposite of what he told us.
Well,
about making America great again.
There's an important aspect to keep in mind, and that is the relative educational levels for high tech in the United States versus places like India. And the sad reality is that our education system, especially in those skills needed to compete in the global marketplace, has been an abysmal failure. The kind of abuses and dumbing down we're seeing in Common Core are not confined to the elementary school levels. It goes all the way up to the very top, and everybody gets an A no matter what you do. And the sad truth is that these individuals from India and Asia, on average, tend to be much more highly skilled than American tech workers. And that is a situation that has to be addressed. Meanwhile, until we can bring the American tech worker up to par with the rest of the world, we've got to get these skilled laborers from someplace. And I'll give you a good example here. It has been very hard to find anybody who knows how to maintain some of the systems that we have here for the website. There are a lot of people running around here saying, I'm a high-tech expert, I'm this and that, and you find out they're simply not qualified. They took an online course, they got a pretty certificate, and they're out there marketing themselves as a tech expert, and they're actually causing more damage than good. And that, of course, is the backside of it. We need to go back to some serious, rigorous accreditation process, so that when you hire somebody on in that says, I know what I'm doing about thus and such, that you have a serious guarantee about it. Now, Microsoft, for all the problems that they've had in the past, they do have a very rigorous program. You're not allowed to say that you're Microsoft certified until Microsoft is really certain you know what you're doing.
Okay, but we're still getting stuff into the United States that only lasts you got a computer that lasts 2 or 3 years, and that's it. So why don't we go ahead and try and get our workers brought up to speed? If they're all these tech gurus, get them brought up to speed like you're saying. But he's telling us we're going to make America great again. But now we're going out there and getting them. I rather go with what I got, try and bring them up to speed and train them and have some of that people instead of sitting there in a food line.
Yeah, but then you're gonna have that gap where the workforce is not meeting the needs of these new American corporations, and that's a very hard and cold reality. Now, I know the end product, the phone, the tablet, the laptop, is designed to last only 3 or 5 years, but the core operating system, like Windows, goes on for machine after machine after machine after machine, and because it is so huge and bloated and complicated, you need people who have literally devoted their entire life to knowing what those internals are, whether it's Windows or iOS, and those are the kind of people that you're going to need for the new startup companies. And unfortunately, you're not going to find them walking down the street anywhere. So there's a gap to be bridged there. It's going to take a little bit of time, and we should pour money and infrastructure and all kinds of priorities into bringing the American IT worker up to speed on all this stuff. But unfortunately, even the IT schools have become as much of a racket as a college degree. We're going to run you through here. We're going to plunge you onto that debt hook for the student loan. We're going to give you a piece of paper that says you're qualified to do something, and they get out in the real world and they just can't compete. So I know it looks awkward, but it's a stopgap measure, and unfortunately it's necessary because without these highly trained people that are unfortunately better trained than our own people, we're not going to be able to kick off some of these new high-tech companies. And then at some point down the road, 2-3 years maybe, our own indigenous high-tech workers will be up to speed and be able to step into those jobs. And at that point, we need to lobby the government to say, okay, we now have a workforce of Americans who know how to do this stuff. It's time to pull back on those H-1B visas or just put a tariff on them that makes it financially unattractive to corporations to hire them.
Yeah, I mean, if that Common Core and everything's that bad, well, why don't we just send our tech, get everybody that is tech savvy, that's slow and behind, send them over to India, say, hey, can we train them over there, and then bring them back? Then we can take care of it.
I don't think India would go along for that deal because right now they're at an advantage. They're at an advantage. Their people have an advantage. So do the Chinese and the Japanese. In fact, all of Asia, they have an advantage over the American IT worker. They're not going to give that up. They're not dumb.
I hear you, Mike. All right, man. It just makes you so mad. I mean, I just was wondering what kind of a deal he cut with them up there, because I mean, we get rid of the one of the Homeland Security that's just as bad, and now we get another one. But I understand what the people you're saying.
Yeah, I don't think there's as much a deal as just a reality that it took 30 years for this country to lose its manufacturing advantage. It's not going to come back overnight. It's going to take years of dedicated work and investment and education to get America back to being in that preeminent position. It's not going to happen overnight. Meanwhile, we need to have the skilled workers that are going to allow the companies to start up and eventually bring along our indigenous workers. I think that's the situation that Trump finds himself in.
Yeah, and the bad part is we've only got him for 4 years, and they're already making up lies saying that, his polls are down, so everybody won't vote for him next time. So, and then we'll go back to the same old, and we'll be there, and then we'll have them all coming in here. Before long, we'll all be on welfare, and,
Well, I think welfare is going to run out of money real soon anyway. I mean, the indicators are not good. It must be very frustrating for Trump. I think he's got a good idea on what needs to happen on the business side of our nation, but he doesn't have anything to work with. The government has already borrowed to the max. They've maxed out all their credit cards. They can't increase the money coming on in. He is unable to cut the expenditures going out to war and other nations. He doesn't really have a lot to work with. And that's where you have to get creative in solving these problems. Anyway, Ron, we're going to let you go.
Thank you.
All right, and I know we got some more callers, but I want to start getting into the news here a little bit before we let the show get completely swamped with callers. Now, if you've been watching the corporate media, you are seeing a continuance of this Russia, 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 Trump, 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 Russia, 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 Trump, Trump, Trump. They're not letting go of it. They have no evidence that it even happened. We've got all these indications of cover-up. The DNC will not let anybody look at their servers. Hillary wiped her server before she turned it over. The indications are that, yes, Seth Rich was the DNC leaker, and he was killed for it. But they're out there, oh, it had to be Russia. You have to hate Russia. If you don't hate Russia, then you're not a real American. And it just keeps on going. Now, here's the good news. Polls are now showing that the number of Americans who are buying this Trump-Russia collusion today are only half what they were last April. In other words, they're not getting traction with it. I think most Americans are just getting sick and tired of hearing about it. It's like all the corporate media talks about anymore is Russia, Trump, and after a while it gets boring. Now remember, Clapper said under oath they found no evidence of Trump collusion with Russia. There is nothing to this story. And that leads to this other article over in Zero Hedge. Russiagate really ought to be called Hillarygate, because according to inside sources, the Hillary Clinton team just invented this whole Russiagate narrative the day after she lost the election to Donald Trump. Oh, Trump can't be the real president. Russia was intervening for him. They stole it from Hillary. We need to get Trump out and put Hillary back in. She actually had this fantasy that if Trump was driven from office, she, instead of Mike Pence, would be installed as the president. By now, they have to realize that is never going to happen. But they came out with this now discredited dossier that Trump and these two prostitutes were caught doing icky things in the Moscow hotel, and he was blackmailable, and therefore he was a tool of the... They just made it up out of thin air to try and salvage the election for Hillary Clinton. It has failed miserably, but everybody's bet their reputation on it, and they can't back off on it. Now, do you remember the guy that actually wrote this dossier, the guy behind the fake dossier, Glenn Simpson? He's the founder of Fusion GPS, and he was supposed to testify in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. He has now canceled. He's refusing to testify. Doesn't want to say a thing about where that dossier came from, or more importantly, the Democratic donors who financed it. Now, we're going to take a break here for some commercials. When we come on back, we got some phone calls waiting and more news. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to take a couple more quick phone calls. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Mike. How you doing?
Doing okay.
Hey, Mike, you know John McCain's address? Because I want to send them don't get well card.
Oh, come on. Let's not be tacky. I mean, we disagree with him politically, but the guy's just had a serious medical problem. All right? And that's tacky. I'm sorry. That's tacky.
I don't know, Mike. The guy's evil, angry, and I don't know. If there is a heaven and hell, I hope he's going down toward Australia there, down under.
Now, what did the Australians ever do to you?
This is true. I'm sorry, Australia. Hey, Mike.
Yes.
People don't realize, like China, you said this before, it's a manufacturing hub. If you want a good product, they'll make a good product. If you want a crappy product, they'll make a crappy product for you that breaks after a week.
Yes.
So, there's a lot of hatred for China because you hear it all the time. Oh, they make garbage. And no, they are a manufacturing hub. It's just so hard for people to realize that, as much as I say it.
Yeah, the cheap, easily broken, easy-to-wear-out product on the shelves of those big-box stores is there at the express request of the corporate management of that big-box store.
Exactly. Where does everybody think their computer parts are made? I run my computer 24 hours a day. It doesn't poop out. Sure, you get bad parts, but that's with everything. American cars, American parts, the F-35. Ring a bell?
Don't get me started on the F-35.
Hey, Mike, you know what's scary about this whole Russian thing? We all know it's a bunch of crap. Is once this teeters out, I'm really afraid of what they're going to try to pull next because, they're losing support. And when that happens, they might pull something really radical.
There's a lot of dangerous, desperate people out there, and you'd think at some point they'd realize this is not working. But as Einstein said, one good definition of insanity is you keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome.
Hey, Mike, I know you talked about this, too, is about the Russian BMBP Terminator.
Yes.
That got sent over. I think they're sending 6 over.
Yes.
I believe. I believe, though, it's the export version, so it's obviously going to not have some goodies that, that's going to be exclusive for, the Russia, because that's what everybody does,
Yes.
They're not going to send their top-of-the-line, everything included, version. But I know you talked about this before. Turkey, there was another report about Turkey getting the S-400s, and they're really close to signing that deal, and that's a game changer, Mike. I mean, people don't realize how much of a game changer Turkey is. I see Turkey having a Russian base there in the near future, Mike.
I agree. Turkey is clearly pivoting away from the West and cozying up to Russia, and that's going to be a major addition to that bloc of Russia, China, Iran, should war come to the region.
And people don't realize Turkey's got the largest non-American NATO force. I mean, their army is tough, and they're huge, and they're a force to be reckoned with. And if it's Russia, Turkey, Iran, North Korea, and China, you ain't going to win. I'm sorry, but it's just not going to happen, Mike.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're right. And again, on the day when our leadership realizes they are losing the conventional war, they will resort to the nuclear arsenal. Because after all, the United States is the only nation in history to ever actually use nuclear weapons of mass destruction against the civilians of another country.
All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Steve in California. I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hey, Mike, I sent you an article a day or so ago about a big mosquito release in Fresno, California. Did you get that email?
Yeah, I did, and this is one of those weird experiments out there, and again, my concern is they're still treating this genetic engineering technology with a huge degree of recklessness. They're starting to discover that some of these altered genes in insects and stuff, they can actually have influence on the genes of, for example, the people that they're going to feed on. They don't really understand it well enough to just be deploying it this recklessly. And there have been so many of these large releases that didn't work out for the stated purpose. Anyway, Steve, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Steve about mosquitoes. And basically, in a nutshell, there is a company called Verily, which is owned by Google. And Verily is basically created 20 million mosquitoes in a lab. Male
20 million mosquitoes in a lab.
Yeah. And they've infected them with
a lab created.
And they've infected them with... Hello?
Yes, I'm here, so I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah.
I've got a question real quick for you, Mike.
Okay.
On this goes out to you and your listeners. that live in California, there's clearly something very different this year about these mosquitoes out here in California. Normally you get a mosquito bite and a little bit of a welt, you itch a little bit, no big deal. But this year, these mosquito bites, the welt is much bigger, and they actually ruptures on its own without you even scratching the thing. I've got some on my arms. It looks like somebody said, "What happened to you?" And I said, "That's a mosquito bite." And my neighbor came down the street and said the same thing. What is with the mosquitoes this year? They're more potent. Something's going on because I got bit, and she had them all over her legs, and they look terrible. So there's clearly something that's been tweaked or changed, that these mosquitoes are not the normal mosquitoes. Now, this is only in California I can speak of, and I wanted to put this out there to you and the listeners in California. Are you experiencing the same thing that I had happen out here?
Okay, well, Steve, first of all, you need to understand this release of these 20 million mosquitoes has not happened yet. It may not even happen for a couple more months. But yeah, we know there's a lot of experimentation with all this kind of stuff going on. And here's the real kicker. They're spending all this money and going through all of this out of concern over the Zika virus. And so far, there's been only one case of it confirmed in the Fresno area, and that woman's partner had been traveling. And remember, it came on out, Zika isn't actually all that dangerous. If you have a healthy immune system, you will just shake it off very, very quickly. But they're out there trying to, just prove how butch they are with their science. And, yeah, the potential for accidents is definitely there. And I do wish they'd exercise a little more care.
Yeah, I do understand that the release is going to happen. It hasn't happened yet. But this has been happening in the last month. Mosquitoes, when we get bit out here, it's just a really serious reaction versus last year's. You just get bit in a little bump. This year, they actually are huge, and they really. I tried the ammonia, the afterbite stuff you use on them to bring, to neutralize the venom, basically from the mosquito itself, the saliva, and it doesn't phase this one. They really itch still, and I just said, well, I'm not going to itch it. I'm not going to itch it.
I got to tell you, before we start pointing fingers at the laboratory, the first thing I would want to check for is a new invasive species. Because the reality is new species are coming in to places all the time. As you know, here in Hawaii, we have geckos. It's almost an icon of our local culture. Somehow this new little black lizard has gotten onto the island. It is breeding like crazy, and it's actually starting to displace the geckos. And it's nowhere near as much fun or attractive, but this kind of thing happens all the time. And from what you're describing, it sounds like it's an entirely new species of mosquito rather than an altered old one. And so I would like to check with the state's vector control and just say, is there a new species of mosquito that's starting to take hold in California? Because that's what it sounds like you're dealing with to me.
Well, I hope the California listeners, chime in on this, because I was thinking the same thing too. But science, what these guys are doing. And like I said, this is a really big difference from last year, the mosquitoes. So,
all right, well, Steve.
Hey, thanks, Mike.
All right, Steve, we're going to let you go. We're going to take one more phone call from Jerry in Chicago. Then we're going to get back to the news because I'm way behind on my talking points. Jerry, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. And for Steve with the mosquitoes, maybe get some turmeric and garlic in your system. Since it comes out of the pores, they're not friendly to that. They might land on you and say, "Oh, dude, don't bite into this guy."
Even overdosing on vitamin B, you'll start to sweat that stuff. And the best way to defeat any predator is to taste terrible.
Well, that's funny because I take a B complex every day too, so that's a good thing to know. Thank you very much for acknowledging me about that. But I really wanted to check in on. You had a caller call up about China and their industry. I got to be honest with you. I talked to a friend of mine who is an engineer for General Motors, and he made a comment that when they send something over to China to be built, they say we'd like this part built for 200,000 miles for this vehicle, and they give them a price. Okay, so then they lower it down to so what if you only got us 100,000 miles? And they lower down the price a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And then it comes down to, hey, how about 70,000 miles since we got a 70,000 7-year warranty on it? What can you give us for that? And that's the part that they go with. Where Toyota and Honda, They look for the 200,000-mile mark. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Well, thank you very much. And you're absolutely right about the Hondas. They just last forever. And I've always had great luck with my Hondas, despite it's coming up on its 18th birthday. I love this Honda. I wish I could keep it forever, but that's not realistic. And when Claire and I finally get a new work car, it will be another Honda. Because, yeah, they built them to last. Of course, unfortunately, that also makes Hondas targets for car thieves because the parts are interchangeable over several years' models. They're not always changing everything every year for a whole new car. They get something that's working in the 2016 model. They're going to use it exactly the same way in the 17, 18, 19, 20 until somebody comes along with something that is provably a lot better. Okay, so we're going to close the phone lines for a little bit. We're going to get on back here to the news. Now, again, there's all this Russia collusion, Russia bribing, corruption, impeach, all this other nonsense. And all the other stories are just being ignored by the corporate media. There was, the fact that John McCain was the one who was distributing that phony Russian dossier to the FBI and to the media, where it finally got published by BuzzFeed. You've got Russia gave $35 million to Podesta's sham company. Russia gave hundreds of millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation to secure the Uranium One deal. And the corporate media is still wearing their little liberal democratic blinders. Russia, 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 Trump, Trump, Trump. We're not interested in anything else, and neither should you be. Pay no attention to all the crimes and corruptions over on the Democratic side. You should only worry about Donald Trump and how we're going to get him. Now, remember, I'm hearing an open mic someplace where I'm getting an audio feed. Okay. Anyway, remember in the saga of Hillary Clinton's email server, originally she had the server set up in her own home, and then she turned it over to this company way out west who was not certified to be working on computers carrying classified information, which was required under a presidential executive order signed by President Bill Clinton. Well, apparently that email server company is now facing obstruction of justice charges because they deleted emails that were, at the time, under subpoena by investigators. So there's another little aspect of this story, and you're not going to see it in the corporate media. You're not going to see it on CNN or Fox or any of that. Now, let's get on back to John McCain. And again, like I said, I certainly disagree with the man politically, but he has had it's interesting, they described it as a minimally invasive craniotomy, and basically they're trying to say it's no big deal, it's a routine annual physical, was part of the routine annual physical. No, it isn't. This is very serious. Apparently, he had a blood clot the width of your 3 middle fingers on his brain. They had to literally open up the skull to get it out of there, and he's still in recovery. And again, I disagree with him politically, vehemently, but I don't like being in hospitals. I'm sure he doesn't like being in hospitals, and I hope he's going to do okay. This is really serious stuff. Very serious stuff. Now, because McCain is in the hospital and recovering, the vote to repeal Obamacare is now on hold. They're going to not do anything about Obamacare or Trump care until after McCain recovers from the surgery and is able to rejoin the Congress, which means probably after the August recess, knowing how serious the surgery was that he just went through. Now, our whole political electoral process is starting to degenerate into a circus of the absurd, and we know all these celebrities who are out there saying, well, we're going to run for this or that office in 2020. I want to be president in 2020. And the latest one to hop on there is Caitlyn Jenner, who is now planning to run for the California Senate. And we're starting to get into the same territory as Italy. Some years ago, I think about 10 years ago, they actually elected a porn star to their legislature. Her name was Cicciolina. Her entire campaign was going around and flashing her titties at people, and she won. And I'm sorry, but we do need to get back to the idea of a meritocracy, of having people who are running the government who actually know what they're doing, what they're talking about, who aren't out there saying the internet's is just a bunch of tubes. And they're out there setting policy on things like the environment without actually knowing anything about it. They're just hired puppets out there pushing the agenda, and the lobbyists can lure them into making some very, very bad votes with enough money, relying on the fact that these politicians themselves are not knowledgeable about these subjects. We're continuing to see Nancy Pelosi and Maxine Waters exhibit clear signs of mental deterioration. Now, out here in Hawaii, we've had a little bit of an upset. Army Sergeant First Class Ikeka Kang was arrested for supposedly wanting to join ISIS, and they're using it to smear the independent media. And this was over in NBC News. It's also been picked up by BBC, where basically this sergeant was convinced JFK's assassination was a conspiracy. 9/11 was an inside job. And just to make sure the whole thing was properly kookified, they threw in the thing, the moon landings were fake. And they're out there saying that this guy was driven to join ISIS because he read those independent media websites. So just to be clear and on the record, with those who are monitoring this broadcast and my website, no, we do not encourage people to join ISIS. It's a big fake fraud anyway. Carl Bernstein of Watergate fame is looking at the contentious nature of politics and the ongoing conflicts in the media and describes it as a cold civil war in this battle between reality and the fake news, and what he describes as different media outlets espousing different truths. He's trying to be polite. There's no such thing as different truths. There's truth, and then there's propaganda and lies. And that's what different truths really means, flat out lies. And we are seeing it day after day after day after day. Now, I get a lot of emails from people who are saying how sick and tired they are of sitting at the airport and looking at those giant screens, and it's nothing but CNN 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You get the same thing in the post offices. Used to get the same thing down the hill at this bank Claire and I do business with, but they switched over to the Travel Channel. I guess even the tellers just couldn't take any more. But as it turns out, according to this article over in Blacklisted News, CNN actually pays U.S. airports to broadcast their news, you'll pardon the expression, at the airline gates. CNN is paying the airports to make sure you're getting your dose of propaganda. Boy, it's just like the view screens out of 1984. You cannot escape the propaganda. It will be ubiquitous. It will be everywhere. It'll be at your airport, your post office, your bank, the shopping malls. It'll be on your cell phone. Nobody escapes the propaganda. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the war zones here. Syrian and Russian warplanes have intensified their attacks on ISIL positions, trying to lift the siege on Deir ez-Zor. And apparently they've done quite a bit of damage to ISIL's lines of supply. And when you are extended out that far, you are dependent on your supply lines. And if those get cut off, then you are isolated and you are in serious, serious trouble. Meanwhile, without officially acknowledging it, the U.S. is now building a third military airport in Syrian Kurdistan. And they're not publicly affirmed. It's just kind of airbase? What airbase? But there's another article over in the Fifth Column News basically saying that Trump is trying to get Congress to authorize him to start building what are termed as temporary U.S. military bases in Iraq and Syria. And in both cases, the United States does not have the permission of the respective governments to be building military bases, temporary or otherwise, on their territory. And what's going to happen with these temporary facilities, it's going to lead to a longer, more expensive, and more deadly war in a region that is suffering the most dire human rights crisis since the end of World War II. They're just making things worse. They're delaying the inevitable. Trump does not want to be president of a country which loses a war anywhere. And this is a case of his ego writing checks the rest of our bodies are not going to be able to cash. Now, Israel, redefining chutzpah, has rejected the Syrian-Russia-U.S. ceasefire deal, even though they had nothing to do with it. It doesn't involve them. But Netanyahu's out there saying that they oppose the ceasefire, but they'll go along with it if you meet some demands. And again, it's none of Israel's business. But they're out there inserting themselves in, saying, we object to what you people are doing, but we'll go along with it if you'll give us a bribe. This is really what it amounts to. Of course, a lot of it focuses on Israel gaining more control over the Golan, and especially all that oil and gas that's going on out there. Okay, we're coming up on a commercial break. We'll be back with more news after these few words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And apparently, Iran has leased an airport in central Syria from the Syrian government. Israel is very upset about that and is already dropping hints they may just blow the place up. And basically, Israeli military sources are saying Tel Aviv will not allow Tehran to lease an airport in Syria, and would also like to confront current Syrian-Iranian negotiations to establish a land base capable of supporting Iranian-linked fighters. Everybody is starting to get all tense on over there. Now, as you know, recently the IAEA came on out and said one more time, Iran is fully compliant with the terms of the P5+1 agreement. And that raises a bit of a problem because from Iran's point of view, it is the U.S. that is violating the nuclear deal. They haven't kept their promises. They haven't eased the sanctions. And Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif is saying Iran is abiding by its commitments, but the U.S. is not complying. And that may be about to get worse because the State Department is teasing that Tillerson will be making a big announcement on the Iranian nuclear agreement very shortly. And White House spokesman Sean Spicer basically announced saying that, as you all know, the president has made very clear that he thought this was a bad deal, and a bad deal for the United States of America. And so basically they're just going to haul off and start the war with Iran. Meanwhile, Iran is saying that the United States will face repercussions because Washington is considering branding the Islamic Revolution Guard Corps as a terrorist organization. Now, this is a uniformed branch of the Iranian military. That would be like some other country coming on in, looking at things like the My Lai massacre and declaring the U.S. Marine Corps is a terrorist organization. It really is rather silly. And adding fuel to the fire, unfortunately, an Iranian court has sentenced a graduate student from Princeton University to 10 years in jail on spying. And this is the latest case involving dual citizens held on security charges in the country. Now, the student in question is named Ziyu Wang. He was originally from China. He's a naturalized American citizen, but he's a dual national in Iran. And they've thrown him in prison as well. We can all see this stuff coming. We all know how this is going to end. As you know, Claire and I live here on the island of Oahu. And lately we've been hearing the military hardware, the heavy aviation, when that C-5 went on out to do that air-launched ICBM intercept test with that. We heard that plane take off. We didn't know what they were doing at the time, but that thing rattles the windows. We'll be right back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. And over in Jerusalem, Israeli forces have attacked Palestinian worshippers at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And basically what it is, following a shooting incident last week, Israeli security forces are basically blocking off the Al-Aqsa Mosque and not allowing worshippers in. Only a few are being allowed in, and this, of course, is adding to the friction in the area because the Temple Mount is supposedly under the control of the Palestinians, not Israel. I love this little story. This is over in military.com, basically saying that officials are still working on a new strategy for Afghanistan. This according to SecDef Mattis, meaning they're stuck in a quagmire and they don't know how to get out. Think Great Britain, think Soviet Union. Afghanistan is a place you should stay out of. Of course, when you're working for the oil companies and the American heroin lords, you go where you're told to go and do what you're told to do here. There's a cautionary word, though, that a mercenary-led surge is not going to help in Afghanistan. And as you know, Donald Trump has recently taken on 2 new advisors. One is, let's see, get down here. All right. Eric Prince, the founder of Blackwater, and Stephen A. Feinberg, who owns the giant military contractor DynCorp. And they are both basically recommending to Trump that it's time to resort to mercenary armies, private contractors, which will make the war much more costly. Now, obviously, the upside is they will not be coming for our sons and daughters to fight it, or for that matter, the illegal immigrants. But they're talking about basically using mercenary armies, and there are a lot of people who are saying that's really not going to work. And there's a simple reason. Yes, the mercenaries are very well trained. They're probably better equipped than our ordinary soldiers, but they're there for a paycheck. They don't believe in the cause. They don't believe in the moral rightness. When they find themselves in a losing position, they will basically retreat. So the idea that mercenary armies are somehow tougher than the regular standing military may not really have that much basis in reality. Turkey has begun bombing U.S.-backed YPG positions in Syria. So now Turkey and the U.S. are on opposite sides of that particular war. Everybody's flinging bombs back and forth. It's frustrating. Now, again, getting back to Turkey, the opposition party to Erdogan is complaining that Erdogan is obstructing the investigation into last year's botched coup d'etat attempt. There's something in there that Erdogan does not want to have made public. Was it a false flag to justify a crackdown on his opposition? Maybe. Meanwhile, hundreds of Iraqi soldiers and fighters have been killed in U.S.-led airstrikes into Iraq. And this is, of course, drawing complaints from the Prime Minister of Iraq. You're supposed to be going after the bad guys. What's wrong with you? This is the same thing in Syria. You say you're here for the terrorists and you're bombing our people. Can't you get your pilots glasses or something? Are the targeting systems on your warplanes that out of whack that you can't hit what you're aiming at? Part of the tragedy of all of this is being reported by Global Research over in Canada, where in Mosul, now that the city has been liberated, they're starting to discover children who lost their parents, and they've literally been living underground like rats and hiding from the terrorists, hiding from the bombing, and they're starting to come on out. They're having to be reassured that everything is okay and they can come on out. And they're suffering from rickets, a lack of vitamin D. They're very thin. They've been starving. Experts are saying they're going to suffer long-term psychological trauma. These are little tiny kids exposed to the horror of war. And they will carry it with them the rest of their lives. Now, as you know, all last week everybody was saying, al-Baghdadi, the Russians got him, we confirm it, and it triggered a faction fight among the U.S.-backed rebels over who's going to be the new boss. Well, once again, al-Baghdadi appears to have risen from the grave. Over at albawaba.com, they're saying an Iraqi intelligence officer is saying al-Baghdadi is still alive. And they're waiting to get confirmation one way or the other. But we've seen this before. The U.S. will proclaim that this or that terrorist leader is dead, and then a couple of months later they show on up again. We're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. A little bit of good news over in the House of Representatives. I don't know how far they're going to get with this, but I think this is a good idea. As you know, they're negotiating the 2018 National Defense Authorization Act, and apparently one of the amendments that's being suggested to it would limit the U.S. participation in the war in Yemen. Now, obviously, Saudi Arabia is acting as a U.S. proxy in Yemen. They're not doing very well. And so there's already been talk about direct U.S. military intervention in Yemen. And how many more times are you going to have to do this? Because it was only a few years ago there was a successful U.S. intervention in Yemen. They drove out the democratically elected government. They installed a puppet regime. And the people of Yemen said, we don't want to live under government run by a foreign country. And they gave the puppet regime the old heave-ho. And that's when Saudi Arabia went back in. And the corporate media, of course, is trying to spin this idea that the government that was kicked out by the people of Yemen is the internationally recognized legitimate government of Yemen. And those people from Yemen who want to run their own country, well, obviously they're rebels and they're troublemakers and they're terrorists. Well, this new amendment is from, it's called the Liu Amendment. And I hope it goes through, but my gut is telling me it won't. Our government has unfortunately, sadly, reached the position where no matter what the problem is, the solution is bomb somebody. Economy's falling apart, bomb somebody. War is good for business. Apparently, there are indications there may soon be a major battle for control of Libya's capital, Tripoli. And like everywhere else the U.S. government has stuck their nose into, Libya is in a state of chaos. And there are already clashes breaking out in the east of Tripoli between forces loyal to the UN-backed Government of National Accord, the foreign puppet rulers, and those who are loyal to the National Guard of the Salvation Government, meaning the Libyan people. Now, a little bit of good news. Down in Qatar, that situation may be ramping on down. Of course, everybody needs to remember what kicked it on off was the United Arab Emirates hacking into the Qatari media and planting a story that offended the Saudis. And it's now known it was a fake story. But Trump has basically stepped on in and said, cool it, guys, because we need to protect our assets in the area. Remember, there's this huge base in the middle of Qatar with all these tens of thousands of Americans. And so Trump is tamping that one down. That's a good thing. Now, as you know, there's a continuing diplomatic kerfuffle over this confiscated Russian diplomatic properties. This happened back when Obama was in the White House, where they persona non grata a bunch of Russian diplomats claiming they were spies, and they seized 2 Russian properties, which technically count as Russian sovereign territory, but the U.S. government seized them. And it was a major bone of contention between the two governments. And finally, last week, the U.S. started indicating, we may go ahead and give you back the properties and calm things down. Well, as it turns out, the U.S. had preconditions. You will do thus, thus, and thus, and thus, and we'll give you back your property. And Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is saying that basically these preconditions amount to property robbery. And I don't know what the conditions actually are. Nobody is really saying. It may be as absurd as you will give Crimea back. But it looks like that attempt to reconcile that issue has hit a big old pothole. Now, here's a little bit of good news. This is South Korea's new president, Moon Jae-in. He's starting to make good on his agenda for the Koreas. And South Korea is now proposing talks with North Korea to ease the border tensions to avoid hostile acts near the border to reduce the possibility of somebody making a mistake that would spin out of control. And it goes even further than that. Now, as you know, that DMZ is heavily mined. It's loaded up with dioxin. But it is possible for it to be penetrated with various means of transportation that run above the ground level. And apparently, this is an article called The Korean Matrix. It's over at Sputnik News by Pepe Escobar, saying that Moon Jae-in is talking about extending South Korea's rail system into and through North Korea to connect with Russian and Chinese rails and start to bring it all together. So he's actually on that path. He wants to reunify the Koreas. And if Kim Jong-un will calm on down and realize what an economic boom these rail lines would bring to his country, things might calm down a little bit. Now, there's another article out of Global Research where there is a United States peace delegation heading to South Korea to basically stand with the government fighting against further deployments of the United States Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System. And they're building solidarity with the peace movement there in South Korea. The peace delegation includes Jill Stein of the Green Party, Reese Chenault of U.S. Labor Against War, Medea Benjamin of Code Pink, good for her, Julian Rhee of the Task Force to Stop THAAD in Korea and Militarism in Asia and the Pacific, and Will Griffin of Veterans for Peace. This is obviously a private group. It does not represent or speak on behalf of the United States government. And what they're going over there to do is to try and bring public attention to the fact that everywhere the United States goes, it sets up weapons. So already the propaganda is being poured on out to say North Korea is dangerous. There's an article over in Sputnik News, which normally I would trust, but they may have been played, where they're saying that satellite surveillance data proves Pyongyang has stepped up its manufacture of nuclear weapons fuels. And this is being sourced to a U.S. group's interpretation of recent satellite surveillance data. I have a little bit of a concern with this because satellites are really good. I'm a big fan of Google Earth. But there's only so much you can see from orbit. And the machinery used to produce nuclear weapons fuel are usually inside buildings that don't happen to have windows. Basically, they're basing this entirely on increased thermal activity around the primary nuclear plant of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. They may be generating more electricity. They may be doing other things. This is purely a guess. Oh, they're doing something. It must be nuclear weapons fuel. And again, even if North Korea has a deployable nuclear weapon, they're not going to use it until they have no other choice. North Korea is not going to attack the United States without a good reason, because of the retaliation that would follow would turn all of North Korea into a giant puddle of glowing green glass. The same thing applies to any of the United States allies in the region. Japan, Guam. Nobody who has nuclear weapons has ever just hauled off and used them, except, of course, for the United States. The whole point of having these weapons is to deter an invasion, to give the other countries a reason to leave you alone. It's the same reason the Founding Fathers gave the American people the right to keep and bear arms, to give an intrusive, abusive government reasons to leave you alone. That's what it's all about. Saddam could have had a nuclear weapon. He wouldn't have used it. Iran may still someday get a nuclear weapon. They won't use it. You don't throw away your best deterrent to being invaded on a whim. The whole point of having nuclear weapons is to send a very clear message to other countries. It will cost you more to invade our country than you will yield in plunder and loot afterwards. So let's not do that. Let's choose a different course. Peace through commerce. Meanwhile, tensions between China and India appear to be escalating. China is holding live fire drills in Tibet to practice the invasion of India. We've been talking about the poor quality of weapons owned by many governments, not just our own. And a lot of people have been very critical of Britain's new state-of-the-art fighter jets, which are basically purchased from the United States. They're F-35s. And they're concerned about the catalog of flaws. They're going to cost hundreds of millions of pounds to fix over and above the price for the aircraft themselves. Now, there's an old pilot's joke that an airplane is just a hole in the air into which you pour money, and that is certainly much more true of military weapons. And they're finding all these problems with the aircraft. The F-35 are unable to transmit data to British ships and older aircraft without revealing its position, and this is supposed to be a stealthy aircraft. The plane software is vulnerable to cyber attack, and Britain can't test it independently. They have to sort of rely on the word of the American manufacturer. Part of the problem is the broadband on the Royal Navy's principal aircraft carrier, HMS Queen Elizabeth, is hampering the jet's ability. And finally, some of the aircraft in certain configurations are so heavy they can't do the vertical takeoff and landing, which is a key function of the aircraft. The F-35 was built around this ducted fan and swivel tail to allow it to take off and land vertically, or at least land vertically. And now they're saying it's simply going to be too heavy to do even that. Now, speaking of HMS Queen Elizabeth, it has so many problems with its defenses. According to this story that came out of the Express in Great Britain, the Queen Elizabeth will be forced to rely on French frigates to protect it from attack. This is coming directly from Britain's Ministry of Defense. It's amazing. Meanwhile, the Royal Marine Arctic Warfare exercises, scheduled for this year, have been canceled. They don't have the money. They're running out of money. And when it comes to war, the nation that runs out of money first is the nation that loses. Now, Congress, in another part of the NDAA for next year, is trying to sneak through a major giveaway to defense contractors. They're tucking language into this must-pass piece of legislation that would expand defense contractors' ability to gouge the federal government, meaning you, the taxpayer, on sole source contracts. In the good old days, the defense contractors had to bid on a weapons program. But today, they can be told by the Pentagon, you're going to get this contract, tell us how much it's going to cost. And of course it's going to be much more money. Of course it's going to be much more money. Boy, we need a new Harry Truman is what we do. Harry Truman made his reputation slapping those defense contractors pre-World War II upside of the head and say, you either give us what you promised to give us or you're not getting any checks. Made him very, very popular. Meanwhile, apparently things are kicking up over in western Ukraine. Somebody firebombed a nunnery, 20 people injured, no deaths, which is a good thing. But it looks like the situation around Poroshenko is starting to get ugly again. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Russia Today is reporting that there was a rock festival in the German town of Themar. 6,000 people showed up, twice as much as the population of the town itself. And the event was called Rock Against Foreign Domination. and was very popular. But the corporate media is describing it as neo-Nazi rock festival. This idea that you want to resist foreign domination, you must be a Nazi. That's part of the smear campaign. If you're not willing to sell yourself into the slavery of the globalist New World Order, one world government, well, you must be a Nazi and we're going to have to treat you like one. Have you noticed that sense of panic among the globalists? Or even within our own government? And interestingly enough, over on Blacklisted News, they're reporting on a study by the Pentagon itself. The study is posted over at the Army War College, which has concluded that the post-World War II U.S. international order is collapsing. They're admitting the United States is a failing empire. Unfortunately, then it goes on to say how they're going to reassert their primacy, and it's more of the same. More surveillance, more propaganda, and more military expansionism. And the Pentagon is now seeing resistance to authority as a major enemy. If you refuse to do as you're told, you're an enemy of the United States of America. Well, the surveillance, the wars, the propaganda aren't working. And it's not likely to work even if you do more of it. So the significance of this report is they know it's not working, but they're not ready to give up yet, which is bad news for everybody who values freedom and peace. That's all we want. We want to be left alone. I want to be left alone to take care of my family and my friends. That's it. You can sit on whatever throne you want, put whatever crown on your head. I'm not interested. Just leave me the heck alone. Speaking of failure, story out of Investment Watch blog, the economic system has failed, and the Federal Reserve is trying to hide it by pushing the stock markets higher. And this is something they started doing all the way back during the Clinton administration. It was called the President's Commission on Special Commission on the Markets, nicknamed the Plunge Protection Team. And every time the stock market would start down, they'd go on in there with a bunch of newly created money, and they'd run the market back up again, which, by the way, was destroying the short sellers, so that they could use that stock market number as a political banner. See, the economy is great. Look at the stock market, and if you're homeless and hungry and your city streets are falling apart, it's your fault. We're doing our job. Look at that stock market. And they're still playing that game. And those numbers at the stock market, first of all, they are rigged, they're overvalued, and second, they are not connected to the real economy of this nation. The vast majority of people in this country do not own stocks. So, and once again, we're hearing this hue and cry, Congress must raise the debt ceiling or risk a constitutional crisis. This is coming out of circa.com. So we keep going through this every year, woe is us, the debt. We can't raise it. It's simply too much for the taxpayer. Well, we'll go ahead and raise it again. We'll let somebody else worry about it. They can't control it. They can't get it under control. There really is only one solution. It's the one Andrew Jackson did. You shut that private central bank down, you write off all the debt created through fraud, and you reset the system. That is the only thing that will save this nation from a massive economic collapse that's going to make the Depression of the 1930s look like a minor speed bump in comparison. When you start taking into account the derivatives exposure of all these financial institutions and the recent changing of the law to make sure the derivatives get paid ahead of anything else, including pensioners and ordinary people, can realize just how ugly this is going to get when it starts to come apart. And by the way, Illinois is already starting to make noises about having to use its pension funds to plug their debt. We're going to take a break for commercials, back with some phone calls after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take some phone calls here. Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hello, Mike. Virgin Galactic had already trademarked the name Moon J. Annie for its soon-to-be-realized lunar bed and breakfast station. So they're suing South Korea's president for infringement.
That's not enforceable on the moon. Lack of jurisdiction. Sorry about that.
Well, it's a thought.
Okay.
Anyway, the Moon Jay is their fictitious bird mascot, of course. About John McCain.
Yes.
You know, when if one were to punch one's insubordinate, elderly subordinate in the head, they tend to sustain things like subdural hematomas and nasty bruises, a la Bernie Sanders, if you recall.
Yes.
You know, apparently, if they get a little too insistent about things or speak out of turn, it's conceivable that maybe, you know, either that or maybe he fell or something like that. But I mean, you could have a ruptured blood vessel.
He could have had a minor stroke that left that clot there. Yeah, I mean, obviously we're not privy to his actual medical records, but you know, and again, I disagree with him politically vehemently, but you know, I'm not in any way pleased by his having to go through this medical emergency.
Well, more than merely disagreeing, I mean, I resent his being in politics at this point because he's been a Teflon Don for far too long. He should have gone to jail by way of court-martial when he hot-started his A-4 Skyhawk on the deck of the Forrestal and touched off a missile on the plane behind him, leading to the deaths of several sailors. They had to evacuate him from that ship. The captain got him off there because he was afraid the crew would take matters into their own hands. He again should have gone to jail for treason by a court-martial when he became Ho Chi Minh Harry for the North Vietnamese. And he also, the third time, he should have gone to jail under civilian auspices when he was part of the Keating 5 scandal.
Yeah.
So that guy should have been in jail 3 times over, and still he's in the public eye.
Yes, he is. And again, I would like to see those Arizona voting records because I get a lot of emails from people in Arizona saying, I can't understand why this guy keeps getting reelected and reelected because nobody around here likes him. Nobody votes for him.
Yeah, I know his father was an admiral who kind of covered his posterior for the military stuff, but as you said, unfortunately, I'm thinking maybe the Keating 5 thing, he might have had influence there, but as you said, unfortunately, that would have taken down John Glenn too, and he was just untouchable in terms of the necessity of his image at the time. So he may have McCain may have benefited from, other efforts to tamp down the Keating thing as well.
Well, we know where those efforts came from because Admiral John McCain's father, was the admiral who basically organized the cover-up of Israel's attack on the USS Liberty and basically said, it was just they were confused, it was cloudy, and the Israeli pilots thought they were attacking this Egyptian horse carrier ship. Which, of course, is easy to understand because we all know Egyptian horse carriers have giant dish antennas all over them.
Yeah, exactly. So, he's been managing to sidestep justice for far too long. So.
I agree.
Anyway.
I agree. And that being said, though, you know, I'm not enjoying his having to go through this experience, and maybe that's because, you know, I don't like being in a hospital and. That's where my empathy is coming from. All right, Glenn, we're going to let you go here.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And we're going to switch over to Mike in South Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, everyone. Couple things, and that is that the horse carrier you mentioned, Michael, they also carry American flags. Don't forget that.
Oh, yeah, big, ceremonial American flags.
They're now being used for prayer rugs.
Yeah. Yes, unfortunately.
All right, moving right along. You mentioned something about, by the way, McCain is the reason why they're not making that vote is this is a deliberate delay on the vote. So McCain's just being used as a reason for them to delay the vote.
No, it's more than that. I mean, Rand Paul is saying the Republicans don't have the votes to push through the current plan. And obviously McCain is one of the votes they need. So they need to wait until he can come on back. And in the meantime, they're going to try and convince some of the GOP to come back on board with repeal and replace or possibly find some Democratic defectors. But as of right now, it doesn't look like the repeal and replace vote is going to work.
It was my understanding, it was explained to me, that this actually is a delay. And what they're going to do is, if they get this through, it'll switch from Obamacare to Trump care, and that's going to be extremely dangerous. They're just setting Trump up for later on. I also understand, and I don't know if you can verify this or not, I've had it semi-verified, that in the NDAA Patriot changes that were made under Obama, he authorized the news medias that they could go ahead and become fake news, basically. There's an authorization that they don't have to tell the truth, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, believe it or not, there never was any kind of a legal requirement for the corporate media to tell the truth, and that was illustrated by this very famous lawsuit involving Fox News and Monsanto's synthetic bovine growth hormone. And there were these two reporters assigned by Fox to write up this puff piece on this Monsanto product about how great it was, and it was making dairies and meat cattle much more profitable. And these reporters got on in there, and they discovered all this evidence that consumers who were eating the meat or drinking the dairy products from these treated cows were suffering all kinds of medical problems. And they took the news story in, and Fox said, you got to take out all that negative stuff and make Monsanto look good. The reporters refused, and they were fired. And they sued for wrongful termination, and they lost on appeal when the court ruled, because there is no law requiring the corporate media to tell the truth. Corporate media management can order their correspondents and their prostitutes to lie to you, and if the correspondents and prostitutes refuse to lie to you, they can legally be fired for cause. And that tells you all you need to know about the corporate media. Now, in terms of the NDAA, there used to be a law that said it is illegal for the U.S. government to propagandize its own citizen. That's what has been removed. Now, of course, they've been propagandizing us all along, but now it's officially permissible.
One last thing I'll pass on, I know this pretty much is true, and that is, you mentioned the changes in the derivatives. There was a banking law that was changed that would allow derivatives to be paid before anybody else.
Yes.
I believe that was done a little bit over 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think in November.
I will inform you that the largest holder of offshore derivatives happens to be Mitt Romney.
Oh, my goodness, my goodness.
Oh yeah, we've been set up. And what we're waiting for, we've been waiting for this for a couple of years now, and that the first bank that fails over there in Europe is going to hit us, and that's going to be the domino effect. You can count on it. But Mitt Romney's sitting right there. He has over 1,000 offshore accounts right now, and Nikki Haley helped him get them.
Okay, boy, oh boy, they are all crooked, aren't they?
All right. They are, and what we have. Keep up the good work.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Mike. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And getting on back to the news here, as you know, we're looking at the beginning of a new housing decline. And everybody's out there trying to find a solution out there. So over at governmentslaves.com, they have an article about how the millennials could be key to Illinois' housing recovery. There's only one problem. The millennials are leaving Illinois. They know it's time to get on out and head for greener pastures. But Illinois is going to be the first. We're going to see state after state after state after state collapsing until there are no more green pastures out there. The other day we were talking about the percentage of American college students who will never, ever in their life be able to repay their student loan debt, and it's about 50%. In Great Britain, it is worse. 77% of 2017 university graduates will never be able to repay their student loan debt. They took higher education and they turned it into another racket. And that's exactly what it is. Lure them on in with promises of high-paying jobs, plunge them on that barbed debt hook as hard and as firm as they can, give them a degree that's worthless, send them on out, and another debt slave for the rest of their lives. Over at the Health Ranger, they're sounding a warning that Bitcoin is now showing signs of collapse. It's basically off nearly 40% from its high. Remember when it was driven up there by all this Japanese buying and everybody said, oh, this is the wave of the future. It's going to be $10,000 Bitcoin. And calmer voices were saying virtual currencies don't have inherent worth. It's just like the Federal Reserve note or numbers in a computer. It is a symbol and it is a token. It is not money. Money is based on an article of actual value, and Bitcoins have no value whatsoever. Their price is set by what somebody's willing to sell or buy them for. And it's all over the place, hugely volatile. Now, we've been talking about the retail Mageddon and all these stores that are hovering at the edge of collapse, and it looks like Sears got a little bit of a lifeline. They secured a $200 million credit line from CEO Eddie Lampert's hedge fund. So they're going to last a little bit longer, but in the long term, they're still going to go away, along with these other retail outlets, until somebody figures out a way to recycle some of that wealth accumulated at the top back down to the bottom so that workers and middle-class people can trade their skills and labor for decent wages and salaries in order to pump that money back into the economy, at the shopping malls, at the car dealerships, at the real estate office. Until somebody changes that dynamic and gets that little recycling going, this economy is doomed. And just issuing more credit lines to keep stores going, it's dragging it out. It's a slow death. It's going to be a slow and painful death. And obviously, we can all count on Sears to be carrying cheaper and cheaper products to try and maximize their profitability. And as people come to understand that Sears represents cheap, shoddy products, their business will fall off even faster. All right, let's take another phone call. Rick in Arizona, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, yeah, okay. Quickly about Sears. That's just a way, I think, for the executives to loot what's left of the company, and then the hedge fund will end up with the company for little or nothing. I want to talk about Sessions, the Attorney General. He was in Minneapolis yesterday, and he's got everybody all fired up. They want to be more aggressive with asset forfeiture, and they're going to share the proceeds with the state and local communities. You know, this Trump's posse is just a bunch of legal thieves. And I would like to, people, I don't know, nobody seems to try to stop it, but some states have passed laws against it. But Trump, in my opinion, is not good for this country. I hope they get rid of him. And that's all I got to say. Thanks for taking my call.
All right. Well, you've got that there. And, yeah, Sessions is out there pushing for a more aggressive civil asset forfeiture program for the very simple reason. The government is broke. They need just another way of looting and plundering and pillaging our own population, and that's exactly what they're doing. We're already heading back into a new dark ages where the tax collectors for the lords and ladies just ride across the countryside grabbing pigs and chickens and farmers' daughters left and right whenever they feel like it. Now, some states have taken the step of passing a law saying that assets cannot be forfeited unless there is a criminal conviction. But that's the exception. In most states, basically, the cops can take your property just by saying, oh, I think you might be involved in drug running, or you may be involved in some other crime, and they just take your property. And there is a legal process by which you can get it back, but it takes years, during which time businesses who've had their cash seized will go out of business. And I saw that happen to somebody I actually have. And the way the police departments get around it is they come and make a deal, saying, we'll give you back half of what we took if you sign this agreement that you will never sue us and you will never talk to the media. That's how they get around it. But it's plunder and pillage, plain and simple. It's where somebody took a really good idea, which was civil forfeiture, to strip from real criminals the proceeds from their criminal activity and turn it back into the public treasury. That actually was a good idea. But like most good ideas, politics eventually turned it into just another racket, and that's exactly what it is. And today in the United States of America, the police are stealing more from the American people than all the muggers and robbers and burglars put together, just like they're murdering more people than all the mass shooters and the terrorists. And we got a story coming up about that one, a tragic, tragic story we're going to be dealing with. Over in Anaheim, California, Disneyland, the happiest kingdom on earth, or happiest place on earth, there have been a lot of homeless sleeping around the park on the bus benches. And Anaheim's response has been pretty much like that here on Oahu. We can't fix the homelessness. We can't get them jobs or homes. What we're going to do is make sure the tourists don't see them, because it might, hamper their tourism experience of our little attraction. And here on Oahu, they keep chasing them out of Waikiki and the other tourist venues back up into the hills, back up to this north shore of the Center Lock on Pearl Harbor. There are thousands of people there. And they're doing the same thing in Anaheim. They removed all the bus benches the homeless were sleeping on. And guess what? The homeless are still there. They're just sleeping on the pavement now. Now, Claire has a saying, and I agree with it. The true measure of any society is how they care for the disadvantaged. And when you look at the way Oahu treats the homeless, the way Anaheim is treating the homeless, you realize what this money junkie philosophy has turned us into a very brutal, inhuman society. And it's only going to be getting worse. Now, here's a bizarre story. Apparently, there's a billionaire, James Riotti. He's supposedly connected with Chinese intelligence. He wants to buy over 1 billion pounds of American copper. Now, copper is a useful metal. It's used a lot in the manufacture of ammunition for guns and artillery. But that's a lot of copper. What does he think is going to happen that is going to suddenly drive up the demand for copper? World War III? Could very well be. All right, we're coming up here on a commercial break, and we'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones here. Ken in Fort Worth, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy, howdy. Tomorrow, Lockheed Martin's going to hire 2,000 workers on the spot to start building F-35s.
Okay, well, good for those workers, but again, I think, my opinion, it's too soon to go into production. There are just so many unresolved problems. Britain's starting to notice them. Our own pilots are starting to notice them.
We're going to build you a new car, and we'll put the windshield wipers on after it's done. That's what it's kind of looking like.
Yeah, it looks like we're building a car. We don't know if it's safe. We don't know if the airbags are going to work. Radios may not work either, but we'll fix all that stuff later and charge you only a modest fee. No,
they're going to hire 2,000 tomorrow.
Okay. Well, like I said, good for the workers. And again, those of you who get those jobs, do the best that you can. I know it's not exactly an environment that's conducive to doing your best, but it's like I said at the top of the show. If we're going to bring the jobs and the manufacturing back to this country, it is not enough that the government is going to encourage it. We as workers have to take pride in what we're doing. We have to say, we're going to be better at making this stuff than the people in the other countries are. And that partnership is going to be key to regaining America's supremacy as a manufacturing power. Okay? I guess we lost Ken. All righty, getting on back here to the economic news. There's some kind of weird going on over with HSBC, and we know that they have been caught in laundering drug money. James Comey was on the board of directors when that was all going down. Apparently, there is a Monitor report on HSBC, and the Monitor is Michael Cherkasky, who's the CEO of Exeger. And apparently in January of this year, District Court Judge John Gleason ruled the report was a judicial document, could be made public. But the Justice Department and HSBC have objected and appealed to the Second Court, which blocked the release of the HSBC Monitor report. There's something going on in there they don't think you need to know, or they don't want you to know. A lot of secrecy out there. Turning to the international scene, riots have erupted in 20 French cities. It's starting to look like Germany in many places over there. A lot of it has to do with the economic hardship caused by austerity and the out-of-control migration. And people are starting to stand up and say, they've been waiting so long for their government to do the right thing. The government never does the right thing. They're starting to get angry over there. Now, Italy, which was very angered with Austria's deployment of troops and armored vehicles to the border, is now threatening the European Union with what they call the nuclear option. They're going to give 200,000 migrants European Union visas and say, go to the other countries. I think the EU is about to come apart, and George Soros will cry. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're talking about the situation in Europe. And again, from the point of view of Brussels, Brexit must somehow be stopped or rendered ineffective. And the latest gambit, this being reported in the Express, the European Union is now trying to acquire the legal power to fine Great Britain for the Brexit for years and years after it happens. In other words, it's okay for Great Britain to go, but they can't let that money go, because Germany and Great Britain have been propping up the rest of the EU as they sink deeper and deeper into the artificially manufactured debt of the European Central Bank. So they're trying to figure out some way they can grab the money. Got to make those bankers happy. Forget about the British people. Forget about the Europeans. They're just human beings. They don't matter. But the banks, we must all worship the banks. The banks are holy. The banks are sacrosanct. It's just ink and paper, people. It's not a science. It's a religion that you are taught to believe. Tony Blair is out there and still insisting that the British really don't want Brexit, even though the Brexit vote showed they do, and apparently his own opinion poll shows the British people want to leave. But Blair has stepped back into the political arena on the side of the Remainers, because he's a believer in the New World Order and the global government, and he dreams that someday when that global government is set up, he'll have his turn planting his little butt on that golden throne of planet Earth. Apparently, in Greece, on the island of Lesbos, they've been using it to set up migrant camps for more of these Muslim invaders, and a group of these illegal alien Muslim invaders burned their own migrant camp down on the island of Lesbos because they were promised all kinds of really cool stuff if they could make it to Europe, and they made it to Europe, and they're not getting what they were promised, so they're starting to act out. They're thinking if they cause enough ruckus, if they set enough fires, that they're going to get all the things that they were promised. New car, cable TV, free ice cream. Once again, Angela Merkel is rejecting any limits being placed on refugees entering Germany. Germany is well on its way to becoming the next Sweden, which is spiraling completely and totally out of control. Europe, as it's been known by the Europeans for generation after generation, is all but gone. And that, of course, is the design intent, to take away your sense of a cultural identity, a regional identity, historical identity, to get you confused about who you are and where you come from and what you're supposed to be doing, confused about what bathroom you're supposed to be using. Because people with a strong sense of self, who they are, where they come from, they are much more difficult to control than humans who just have no clue what's going on around them. Now, Hungary is directing its full attention as part of its 2-year battle to keep migrants out of the country. It's going after George Soros, and they're stepping up their fight. And the Prime Minister, Viktor Orban, is basically wrapped up a 6-week anti-Soros campaign on Saturday. The streets of Budapest have been filled with posters and billboards of the Hungarian-born billionaire with the caption, "Don't let Soros get the last laugh." And the Hungarian government is now imposing new legislation that will force non-governmental organizations in the country to reveal just where their money is coming from. And the idea is they want to spot these NGOs that are working on Soros and agenda and get them out, the way Russia did a few years ago. Hungary is taking this very seriously. They're saying this campaign against Soros is a matter of national security. And yes, it is. Because Soros' goal is to destroy all nations' sovereignty and independence. Okay, let's take a phone call. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Listen, I don't understand why Britain just doesn't tell the EU to go stick it. They're not. What are they going to do? They can't force them to do anything. And Britain's probably the most powerful military, except for Russia and Europe, And that's what they should do. Just say, no, we're out of here, period. And as far as Tony Blair goes, this man is a traitor and a war criminal, just as George Bush and a whole bunch of them. The only place that guy should be is, first, he should get a public trial, just as by the way, so should Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, whatever his name is. All these guys should be placed in a public trial, and then they belong at the end of the rope, what they've done. They're criminals, and yet they keep on opening their mouths and trying to push their way. I just saw two war criminals the other day getting together. It was on some show. I don't know if it's news or YouTube. W. Bush and Slick Willie. Okay, two crime families actually that work very well together.
Oh yeah,
smuggling drugs into this country and all the war crimes. When are we going to get smart and finally understand who these people are? They talk about enemies. I don't consider Russia an enemy of ours. I don't consider Iran an enemy of ours. I consider these slime balls that run this country, or that have been running this country, these are the real enemies.
I agree.
These people belong in prison or at the end of the rope for what they've done. They've committed incredible crimes. They've hurt both Americans and they've hurt other countries also. They're misusing our soldiers to commit horrible crimes. They're not, these troops are not really fighting for the country. They're fighting for this globalist order.
Yes. For corporations.
Whatever. You would corporations. And you were just talking to me before about about Syria and all that. What's going on there? I mentioned him before. Lee Stranahan used to work for Breitbart.
Yes.
He kicked him off because he was too good. He's doing a couple of big investigations. One is the Ukraine influence on the election for the Democrats. The other is on this. It's called the Genie Oil Company, and he looked up the executives on there. Genie Oil Company is oil out of the Golan Heights there in Syria, and he looked up the people on the executive board, and you got what's the name of Rupert Murdoch, Bill Richardson, former governor of New Mexico.
Yes.
One of the Rothschilds, a couple of the Rothschilds, a couple others too. Have a lot of clout, both Democratic and Republican. When are people going to get smart? These people are using. And can you imagine if I was a soldier today? What I know, and I'm going to be told to go, fight. When I know I'm really fighting for these globalist banksters and other corporate garbage in this new world order. Can you imagine that having to do that? What I personally don't see how they're getting any volunteers in there.
Well, they're getting volunteers. They're getting volunteers. We've talked about this before, and we've seen it right here in Oahu. They're getting people to sign up for the military because these young people have absolutely no other options. It's sign up for the military or live with their parents at home or be homeless. And it really is that dire. In a way, it's an engineered economic draft. And so they're in the military because there simply were no other options available.
See, after 9/11, at least people I personally believe it was real, okay? As soon as my sons were, one of my sons actually were old enough, and they asked about the military and all that, I had no problem with it. As soon as they graduated high school, one of them actually joined the military. Thank God he's okay. He didn't, and he got smart while he was in it, and his father got smart too, meaning me, and started realizing what this is really about. And unfortunately, but I don't think they can fool people this time. I really don't.
No, they can't. That's why that Pentagon report is out there saying the real enemy of the U.S. government is resistance to authority. You know, the American people are getting uppity, they're asking questions, they're doubting what they're being told, and they can't really have that. Now, I want to step on back to your issue about Great Britain just cutting off ties and saying we're off and free. It's a little more complicated than that. Because Great Britain has been part of the European trading bloc for so long, much of Britain's business activity, economic activity, is tied up with Europe. And if Great Britain just cuts the line and floats away, then all of a sudden Great Britain has nobody to sell their products to, their produce to. They've got nobody that they can import things that they need from. It would be a huge economic shock, both to Europe and Great Britain, could actually cause a major disruption there. Britain can't afford to pull the plug on Europe until it has established new independent trading agreements with other countries, which is why every time Great Britain talks about establishing trade relations with another country, Brussels comes in and says, no, you can't do that until the negotiations are done.
Well, I get some solution for Britain. Tell all these other countries, including our own, to go stick it and make a deal with Russia, China, with Iran, and plus Eastern Europe. Because Eastern Europe is not going to take these refugees in. They're not going to put up with this garbage. They're making a stand already. Hungary, Poland.
Yes.
These are the people they can trade with, and tell the European Union where to go, and tell the United States where to go too if we insist on certain things. Oh, you can't trade with Russia because of the sanctions. Just tell everybody, stop listening to all this stuff. It's time for countries to be independent and look out for their best interests.
Yeah, that's it. Always was. This globalist government idea. It's been badly implemented. It's in the process of self-destructing, and maybe the reason Great Britain isn't going with the hard Brexit is they're saying the EU is going to come crumbling down anyway. Let's just be patient and let it happen. It's the same advice I give to our listeners who call in and say, now's the time to take action. No. The United States government is headed for a Soviet Union-style collapse, and all we have to do is just stay back and stay patient and stay calm, and it's going to happen. And we need to be prepared for what we're going to do after that happens, because at this point, it seems pretty much inevitable.
A couple of people already now, used to be friends, say I'm becoming a traitor. They say on Facebook, the stuff I'm saying. And I told them, I said, no, the traitor is people like you that keep following this government. This is not our government. This is a globalist occupied government that's telling us what to do, that's somehow hijacked everything. And we haven't had a true patriot as a president since John F. Kennedy. And you know what happened to him.
Yes.
And by the way, that's another thing, too. I don't know how, you know who Robert Tosh Plumlee is, right?
No, actually the name doesn't ring a bell.
No, I'm surprised because he's been in InfoWars a number of times. He's a friend on Facebook. And he posts a lot of stuff. He used to work, he has kind of a shady background, but now he's a patriot. And he says some of the stuff where he said, he posted something the other day, not only my Facebook, it was all around. I shared it with anybody who will take it. He said that basically he knew Lee Harvey Oswald when in 1953, when he first went into the military, because they were recruiting juvenile delinquents and troubled youth and stuff like that as young as 14 or 15 years old. And he said him and Lee Harvey were 15 at the time. And Oswald was sent over purposely. And he kind of hinted. Plumlee had kind of hinted. He didn't say directly, but that he might have been involved in it, in what happened in Dallas, because he mentioned something about that. It's the first time I've ever seen him say something like that. I guess, without actually saying it outright. So, I mean, people have pangs of conscience, and he has done a lot of good things for the Patriot movement in the last few years.
I'm well aware of that. I'm well aware of that. I have some sources that I have that have been very open about how they used to work for the intelligence agencies, and they thought it was fun. They thought it was James Bond, and they did a lot of things that as they get older and older and more sensitive to the realities of life, they come to regret some of the things that they did, because they did some bad things that didn't really make the world a better place. It just made some money junkie richer. And they're out there. They're looking for some kind of atonement, for some kind of redemption, if you will. Anyway, Mark, we're going to let you go here because I still got more news to get to. Thank you very much here. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Okay, I hinted at this story a little bit before, and we're going to get into it, and this is just absolutely tragic. This happened over in Minneapolis, and it involved a woman from Australia. She was this healer into yoga and all the rest of it. She was engaged to be married next month. And so Saturday night, she's hearing a noise outside her home, and she calls 911, and the police show up, and they shot her. I mean, she was outside in her pajamas, no weapons, no anything. And she was shot through the door of the squad car by Officer Mohammed Noor, who supposedly was on the police force for 2 years. This is completely unacceptable. What have they turned the police force into? Shoot first, ask questions later. And there were witnesses all over the place, so they couldn't put a drop gun on her. They couldn't claim she was acting in a threatening manner. This is a yoga instructor in her pajamas. And there's been another similar incident. This is being reported over in Oraz.com, where there was a young man named Austin who was going through some personal difficulties and went up to the room of his parents' house and just said, leave me alone, leave me alone, leave me alone. And finally the parents were worried enough they wanted to have a wellness check, which is where a police officer comes in and says, are you okay? Instead, an entire SWAT team showed up. They had the entire neighborhood full of cars and these armored vehicles, and apparently just scared this kid so bad that he went ahead and committed suicide. There's such a thing as an appropriate response to a situation. There's a term called de-escalation. And our police aren't being taught that anymore. They're being taught by all these Israeli security companies to treat the American people the way the IDF treats the Palestinians. And we see how often innocent Palestinians are being shot over there, and it's happening here now. There is no reason for that Australian woman in Minneapolis to be dead today. You know what's really amazing? Law-abiding American gun owners seem to understand the use of firearms better than the police department. You're always told, check your target. Make sure you know what you're shooting at. Make sure you know what is in the background if you miss before you pull that trigger. And apparently this cop just drove on up, saw this girl standing there in the pajamas, and opened fire. Now, as you know, one of the more interesting departments in police work is the Vice Squad, where they're out there checking for sex crimes and gambling and so forth. And apparently up in Alaska, they're considering a bill that will outlaw actual sexual contact between undercover police and the people they are investigating. And 2 months ago, Michigan became the last state in the U.S. to make it illegal for police officers to have sex with sex workers in the course of the investigation. And the cops up in Alaska are saying, look, we can't do this properly if we're not allowed to. I'm sorry? Fondue. Captain America. Yes, they're out there fondueing. If I can't get some cheese, the fondue is no good. All righty. When we come on back from this next commercial break, political correctness on parade, and it's just getting sillier and sillier, and I think I know what may be going on here. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And over at Breitbart, they're talking about how the Association of Teachers and Lecturers, it's a union, is calling for compulsory gender diversity training for sixth form college and further education teachers, warning staff who refer to non-binary persons using incorrect pronouns could face legal action. In other words, in all of this LGBTQT, LSFMT, BFD, PB, BBD, and O, the idea is now they're coming up with all kinds of new pronouns to cover all these potential situations. And that's crazy enough, but now they're talking about literally you can be arrested and penalized for addressing a person with the wrong pronoun. Now that is utterly ridiculous, but I think the goal here is this goes all the way back to William Shakespeare and Henry IV and his advice to the young prince who's about to become king. Make it thy business to keep busy minds giddy. In other words, keep people focused on the small stuff and they will not see what the great rulers are doing. And this is more of the same. They want us all so worried about exactly what words we're using that we're oblivious to larger thoughts. That's what this is really all about. And again, this idea that you can be legally punished for using a wrong pronoun. Boy, talk about dictatorship right there. 1984, Newspeak. You'll use Newspeak. If you used your old language, you will be punished. Now, over at Allure magazine, they've taken issue with a recent scientific study that showed men prefer slim women, which to nobody's surprise, I'm kind of wondering why that was, they felt they needed to fund that. But Allure magazine says that any scientific report showing that men prefer slim women, it's dangerous, it's pointless, it's triggering, it's irresponsible, and it shouldn't exist. I have been watching that series on Albert Einstein, and it finally had its series finale, and they were talking about events that were going on over in Germany, including the book burning. And there was an aspect of it that most people are not aware of. What Germany was burning were primarily books written by Jewish scientists, including Einstein himself. The idea that there was a German science and we don't need that other science. And when I saw that, and of course it did lead to a tremendous brain drain on Germany at a time when they could not afford it, I thought back to that article the other day where feminists were basically saying anybody writing an article doing research shouldn't look at anything written by white men. Just exclude them. And you can see the obvious parallels there and the direction that this nation is going. If you're going to be an honest, objective researcher or scientist, you look at the source materials. You don't look at who wrote it. You look at the data, you look at the experiments, you look at the reproducibility, and that's what you should go on. But just as it was bad for the Nazis to burn all of the scientific writings of Jewish scientists, it's wrong for feminists to say that we shouldn't be looking at any scientific documents written by white men. The parallels are unmistakable. We are headed in a very, very dangerous direction. Getting on back up to Germany, Bavaria is now talking independence. They're sick and tired of Angela Merkel, and 1/3 of Bavarians want to become independent from Germany. It's a lovely country, by the way. So rather than welding the world together into a one-world government, all of this refugee and ECB and IMF nonsense is starting to fracture it. It's going the other way. I'm pretty sure that's the reason Bill Gates said we got to cool it on the immigration into Europe, because he recognizes Europe is about to tear itself apart. And that, of course, would be a major setback for the globalist New World Order, which is trying to glue everything together. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, over at King's College in London, they have, as do so many of the older established historical universities, a Founding Fathers Gallery, which is a collection of photos and statues of the people who started the college. in the early days, who built it, who got it started. Well, that has now come under attack because it's all a bunch of old white guys, and it's triggering to minorities. It's triggering to the women. They shouldn't be up there. It's making all these other people feel bad. So they're taking all these statues and photos down, paintings down, of the people who actually built the college, and they're putting up a wall of diversity where they're just going to go on down and make sure that they've got one of each. There's a woman, there's a Chinese, there's a Mexican, there's a black, da-da-da-da-da-da. We're going to wind up as messed up as Zimbabwe with this open war on white people. By the way, do you remember Professor Johnny Williams, guy over at Trinity College? And he openly advocated that emergency first responders showing up in an accident should just allow the white people to die. And a lot of people found that very shocking, but Trinity College has said, no problem. No, we don't have a problem. It's this First Amendment right to freedom of speech to say that white people should all be allowed to die. All right, we're going to take a phone call. James in Ohio, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. Congress may be taking an interest in Obama exerting undue influence on the FBI. Today, I'm not sure what it means, but today the House Intelligence Committee subpoenaed James Comey's blue dress. So, not sure.
Okay. All right. Well,
also with Trump, I'm a never forgive, never forget guy with politicians going back on their promises, but I still reserve some liking for Trump, and I was trying to figure out why. I finally figured it out. It's because he breaks the fourth wall.
Yeah, he does. He definitely does, and that's why the corporate media hates him, because he's bypassing them to reach out to the American people.
But we can't afford to be purists right now.
Well, no, I don't see myself as a purist anyway. In fact, more and more, especially with the revelation that the CIA was telling Trump that there was no question that Assad gassed his own people. We know that those who are around Donald Trump are lying to him to get their agenda served. And Trump needs to wake up and realize that's how politics works in the White House. They're not there to work for the president. They're there to exploit the president for their own gain.
Yeah, well, that's all I got for you. Keep up the good work, and thank you.
All right, thank you very much, and we're going to let you go here. Down in Chile, in Santiago, 280,000 people have lost their electricity when they got hit with the first snowfall in 20 years. Also, a lot of snowball fights going on down there, but it's their first snow in 20 years in Santiago, Chile. And apparently the power infrastructure just isn't used to that kind of weather because it had a real problem. And again, reinforcing something we already know over at Natural News, nearly all the warming evidence being wagged at you by the global warming and corporate media people, it's all based on temperature adjustments to the raw data. And they will not release the raw data. Occasionally, it gets leaked out, and time after time after time, we see that the raw data does not support the story of a warming planet, let alone any connection to humans, but they're still pushing that agenda to trick you out of carbon taxes, and more importantly, to get you to surrender the last of your freedoms to a global environmental authority that will tell you you have to live in a little tiny box for the sake of Mother Earth. It's a big part of the New World Order. They're bringing back surf shacks. I don't mean surf like beach shacks. I'm talking about SERF. Take a phone call from Kathleen in Paris. Kathleen, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I thought I would give an update on the hashtag unrig plan that Cynthia McKinney is working on.
Yes.
It seems that part of what they needed to do was they were planning 400 and something meetings, like town hall meetings, in a lot of, like over 400 town halls around the nation while the Congress was home on their vacations. And they were going to organize this through meetup.com.
Mm-hmm.
And meetup.com has thrown a wrinkle in there and said that, this, for some legal reason doesn't fit with their, guidelines or something like that. So I just thought I'd let you know about that because she's still working on that, and some people are going to try to help her still arrange these meetings. Sort of a grassroots thing, but I don't know.
Well, when you have a government that is populated at least half and probably a lot more people who got those high offices through election fraud, they do not want that thing changed. And we are seeing all of this talk about how even people that are appointed to Donald Trump's Election Integrity Commission are some of the worst election manipulators out there. They don't want the system to change. They want it to stay exactly the way it is because they are the beneficiaries of what is another racket. And
yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, well, that's true. But what is meetup.com? What's their, finger in the pie?
Well, we might have to look at who owns meetup.com, or they may simply have been approached by certain government officials and saying, if you allow this to happen, we're going to find ways to mess with you. Remember when Conspiracy of Silence about the Franklin scandal came out, was going to be on TV? It was already in the TV guide, and members of Congress went to the network and said, if you air this, we will change the laws to drive you out of business. And so it was pulled. Somebody bought all the tapes and destroyed them, but there was one surviving editor's work tape, which is what you find when you go out and look for this online.
Amazing. Well, thanks a lot. Just wanted to get that out there.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Alex in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, do you know if Loretta Lynch's hearing is supposed to be this month?
I don't know. I think Susan Rice is testifying later this week, but I don't know when Loretta Lynch is going to be called.
Oh, I thought one of them was the 27th. I thought it was Loretta Lynch.
Could be. I just don't know.
Okay, I've looked online to see if it's available, like the schedule, but it's not there. I wonder why. I guess they don't want any of us to see it in public, huh?
It could very well be. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people in Washington, D.C. who want all of this to go away. Remember when I told you about there are two kinds of secrets in politics. There are the little secrets that are useful during campaign season, like Anthony Weiner and his misbehaving with his cell phone. Then there are the great secrets, which if they became known, would bring the entire government down. The truth behind the Kennedy assassination, the truth behind 9/11. And if I am correct as to what Hillary Clinton was really doing with that private email server and that foundation, that too is a scandal that would bring down the entire government.
It needs to come down. I mean,
I'm in agreement. I'm in agreement with you. I mean, people are still out there saying, I have to support this government. I'm dependent on Social Security. Social Security's broke. It's not going to be there when you need it.
Yeah. Well, what are we going to do about what's taking place? I mean, it seems like they're up in the Eiffel Tower and we can't get up there. It's pathetic.
Well,
do you have any ideas of what we should do?
Yeah, I've been saying it all along. This government is headed toward a Soviet Union-style collapse. Just kick back, be patient, stay calm, and let it tear itself apart. And it's going to do that and be ready to start a new nation based on the original constitutional principles when it is all over. Okay, Alex, we're going to have to let you go. We're running out of time. We still have a bunch of callers on the line. Ramsey in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
Yes, thank you. You see, sir, I have a question. You said last week you were comparing Adam Smith to John Nash, and you said Adam Smith was wrong and John Nash was right. Can you just explain that a little bit for me, please?
Yeah, Adam Smith held forward with a belief that everybody acting in their own self-interest, totally focused on their own self-interest, society would move forward in the context of the economy, would move forward in a positive direction. And John Nash, in his doctoral dissertation, proved that that was wrong, that everybody serving their own greed could eventually lock the system up, and that anybody that was in a decision-making position in a corporation or the government would have to take into account the environment around them in order to make the best possible decision. And obviously the money junkies prefer Adam Smith because it justifies them being very, very personally greedy and making 400 times what their own workers do, driving around in supercars and all the rest of that stuff. John Nash's analysis, and he did back it up, is that planners have to be more responsible. They have to be aware of the whole situation, the long view, the wide view, or they're going to make some bad decisions and lock the system up, and that's exactly what happened.
Okay, but see, sir, in my opinion, the situation like this in the United States, because all these money junkies, as you call them, they became so powerful, and then they changed the laws, like they manipulated the system.
Yes,
that's how I see it.
Yes, no question about
Thank
it.
you.
No question about it. The system is totally, irretrievably, irrecoverably corrupt. All right, we're going to switch over here to Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. You're talking about trade. This is a beautiful thing. John Nash, who pioneered the game theory
yes.
Equation, which basically pioneered all of this online gaming, said that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, and we can all come out ahead. Now, unfortunately, as you had pointed out, and I know for a fact you've looked at trade imbalance sheets with other countries or as a whole with the United States, and it's ridiculous. The United States is inundated with unpayable debt,
yes.
and the only reason they've gotten away with this monstrosity of a sellout that these politicians have perpetrated on the American people is because of the U.S. Federal Reserve. It's ridiculous.
Well, private
central
banking in general, because other nations that are struggling under private central banking are basically doing the same thing. But the United States really got into trouble back during the Reagan years, where the U.S. government borrowed so much money to fund the Strategic Defense Initiative, we went from being the world's largest creditor nation to the world's largest debtor nation in the space of just 12 years.
Mike, it's even before that. As soon as the United States delinked from gold, and banks could just create as much as they want, 10 to 1, whatever the reserve laws said, they could just inflate the currency away. And Mike, the United States is not alone. With this NAFTA free trade, quote unquote free trade agreement, Canada exports not even $7 billion to Mexico, and we import about $40 billion. So you multiply that by 10, and that's pretty much where your country sits with NAFTA. And at the same time, now you've got Canada to deal with as well, and then the rest of the world. All these trillion-dollar deficits are a result of this trade imbalance. It's ridiculous.
Well, it is.
You know this for a fact.
It is, and part of this trade imbalance was this global design that all manufacturing of electronics will be in this region, and all agriculture will be in that region, and all clothing manufacture will be in that region, so they could sit astride the shipping lines and collect huge amounts of money as these goods are shipped back and forth across the globe. By the way, I do want to back up here a little bit, because John Nash's gaming theory isn't what's behind online gaming. It was an application of gaming theory to analysis of the economy and the stock market, and if memory serves me right, that's what he actually won the Nobel Prize for.
Yes. Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, it did really apply to online gaming, but it was adapted to a group of people, obviously being stronger than just one. And his game theory revolutionized, almost everything around us in ways that we don't even understand. And the only thing that's still held back is economics, because, obviously the people who hold the gold hold the power, and they've got the gold.
Well,
because everyone else
that's no longer true.
Paper.
That's no longer true. Whoever's got the largest number in their computer holds the power. Gold is nice to have, and I advise people to have as much as they can. But it's no longer the limiting factor on the acquisition of wealth, now that wealth is basically an imaginary commodity.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely. And it's a commodity that is traded, it's bought and sold, just like everything else, and the only thing that's missing is labor. That's the only thing they can't account for because it's so cheap in other countries. And it's going to change. It's going to change. China's, going to get better. At least we can hope it'll get better, to bring the wages up, to bring jobs back.
Because they're
coming back.
Yeah, I mean, I sense that a lot of China's more recent economic problems are the result of economic warfare than anything China is doing internally, just like we're seeing down in Venezuela. The United States government has weaponized the global economy as just another form of coercive pressure on other nations to do as they are told. Anyway, Al, we're going to let you go. We're coming up on the end of the show here. Yes, absolutely. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go. They've got some nasty fires over there in the western United States, in British Columbia. 120 wildfires in British Columbia. 26,000 people evacuated. And, of course, the global warming people are saying it's global warming. No, it's because nobody has the money to keep those fire breaks open. That's what's going on here. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program this Monday here. A little bit of a whoopsie for Tesla. A driver and 4 passengers were hurt when his Tesla suddenly accelerated while on autopilot, careened off the road, and flipped into a marsh. And apparently David Clark of Eden Prairie, Minnesota, was just driving along with his friends, put the electric car into its autopilot feature, was approaching the intersection of 141st Street and 172nd Avenue, and when he engaged the autopilot, according to the report to the police, the vehicle suddenly accelerated, causing the car to leave the roadway and overturn. And this is not the first time. They've had some other problems, including a fatality with the autopilot on the Tesla not really working. And maybe I'm just an old-fashioned Luddite, or maybe I'm just spiritually cousins with Jeremy Clarkson. I want to drive my own car. I do not like the idea of a driverless car. Driving is fun. Driving is a personal expression. These days in my Honda, extreme caution. That's what I'm expressing out there. But again, they don't seem to really have the bugs out of this thing. And it's going on out. Now, I think ultimately the solution to the self-driving vehicles is going to require a change to the roadway infrastructure itself. Some kind of special painted markings or some kind of embedded wires, barcodes on the bottom of the traffic signs so they can be read more accurately. But it alarms me that so many of these new technologies are being put out there and they're still not really quite working properly, whether it's auto-driving cars, vaccines, GMO crops, so forth and so on. Now, Microsoft has apparently and arbitrarily decided to cut off Windows 10 support for some early PCs. They're only 3 or 4 years old, but they will no longer be able to receive new feature updates to Windows 10. And apparently it has to do with a specific CPU chip those computers are using that Microsoft just doesn't feel they want to spend the money to support any longer. Another problem with water over in Tennessee. Now, over in Memphis, Tennessee, the people are proud of their water. Coming out of the tap, it tastes very good. Claire and I had the same experience in Washington State. But now, unfortunately, it's starting to show that the groundwater beneath the coal-fired Allen Fossil plant in southwest Memphis is starting to leak. The storage tanks that hold the coal ash are starting to leak as well. By the way, a company called Primark, they manufacture flip-flops, slippers for your feet. They're having to recall thousands of pairs because they contain chrycine, which is a carcinogenic in humans. Apparently, it's absorbed through the soles of your feet. It's amazing here. Okay, there's the music. All right, I got to go and do Jim Goddard's show. We'll be back here tomorrow on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Stay tuned for John Stadtmiller's program. Take what you learn here and at the website, share it with everybody that you know. This is literally a knockdown, drag-out fight between the corporate media and the truth. We have to win this one. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Aloha, America.